Close your eyes for just a second. Imagine the rolling, sun-drenched mountains of Makkah. You can almost hear the rhythmic beat of desert drums, right? The wind sweeping across those massive golden dunes. Today, in this explainer, we're stepping back into the early 7th century to uncover the epic life of a man whose absolute courage literally altered the course of history, Hamza ibn Abdul-Muttalib, radiyallahu anhu.
As the old saying goes, he was a hunter who feared nothing, until he found the truth. And wow, does that sum it up perfectly. This is the story of the Lion of Allah. Through our sources today, we're going to see exactly how a man famous for his unmatched physical prowess, and honestly, his fierce independence, totally transformed into the ultimate shield for a heavily persecuted community. It's an absolute cinematic saga of loyalty, combat, and pure, unwavering devotion. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the Hunter of Makkah, Hamza ibn Abdul-Muttalib.
So right off the bat, you need to know Hamza wasn't just anyone. He was born into the highly respected Banu Hashim clan, and his connection to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was incredibly deep. Paternally, he was his uncle through Abd al-Muttalib. Maternally, via the Banu Zura clan, he was his second cousin. But actually, the bond went way deeper than just bloodlines. Arab custom at the time dictated that infants nursed by the same woman became milk brothers. Since they grew up just a couple of years apart, they shared this profound, lifelong emotional connection.
And physically, I mean, the man was an absolute giant, a peerless wrestler, a master marksman, and a desert hunter who thrived under the absolutely brutal Hijazi sun. They literally called him the Lion of the Desert because, get this, he single-handedly hunted a wild lion and wore its skin. Just incredible. But, initially he stayed completely out of the heated theological disputes of his time. He lived a pretty neutral lifestyle, really just focused on hunting and tribal affairs.
Which brings us to section 2, the Shield of Truth. Now, the year is 616 CE, and the tension in Makkah is literally at a breaking point. Hamza is coming back from a long hunt when he gets some disturbing news. Abu Jahl has just physically assaulted his beloved nephew near Mount Safa. So, driven by this fierce tribal pride and just a sudden, massive surge of justice, Hamza's towering silhouette marches straight to the Kaaba precinct. And without a second of hesitation, he walks right up to the chieftain and strikes him across the head with his heavy hunting bow.
Standing right there over the stunned oppressor, Hamza roars out this incredibly public declaration. He says, "Do you insult him while I follow his religion and say what he says? Retaliate against me if you have the courage." I mean, wow, what a breathtaking moment, right? In a society strictly ruled by tribal warfare, that single sentence completely shattered the social dynamics of Makkah. Harming Hamza now, that would instantly ignite a massive blood feud.
But you see, this wasn't just some rash physical act. It actually triggered a profound spiritual metamorphosis. That fierce public defense immediately gave way to immense psychological weight. Historical records tell us Hamza actually spent that following night at the Kaaba, completely consumed by intense doubt, praying deeply for divine guidance. By morning, the Prophet provided him with reassurance, which sealed faith right in his heart. And ultimately, Hamza experienced a mystical vision of the angel Jibril, an event that completely overwhelmed him, effectively transforming him from a tribal protector into a devoted spiritual disciple.
So the Quraysh had to react, and fast. Think about it. Before Hamza's conversion, they heavily relied on direct physical harassment of vulnerable Muslims. But suddenly, Arabia's most feared combatant is the Prophet's literal shield. They had no choice but to pivot. They completely shifted their tactics away from physical violence and toward economic boycotts and diplomatic negotiations. Hamza's presence alone fundamentally changed the geopolitical landscape of the entire city. Moving on to Section 3, the Valor of Badr. Hamza really quickly established himself as a pioneering military leader. In 1AH, he was actually entrusted with the very first military banner of Islam. But, perhaps his most vital armor was his bond of brotherhood. In Medina, the city of light, he was bound in sacred brotherhood to Zayd ibn Haritha. This really proved that faith is the strongest tie of all. They even shared a single riding camel on the long march to Badr. And then, right before the main battle lines clashed, he secured a massive strategic advantage by neutralizing an enemy warrior to protect the Muslims' vital water wells. 3. That's the number to remember here. As the armies face off, 3 elite Quraysh chieftains step forward. They're demanding a traditional pre-battle champions duel, and they absolutely refuse to fight anyone but their direct equals in noble standing. So what does the Prophet do?
He calls upon 3 men from his own family to answer the challenge: Ali, Ubaidah, and of course, Hamza.
So heavily armored, the enemy demands to know exactly who they are facing. And Hamza's response just echoes across those dusty plains. I am Hamza. I am the Lion of Allah and his messenger. It's such a legendary battlefield identification. In the clash that follows, Hamza swiftly defeats his opponent, Shaiba, showcasing a level of martial prowess that instantly strikes terror into the opposing army.
And once the general battle actually commences, Hamza makes himself purposefully identifiable. Get this, he wore a bright red ostrich feather on his chest and waded right into the heart of the enemy lines, famously wielding 2 swords simultaneously. The impact was just devastating. A captured Quraysh chieftain later said, "It was he who caused us the most damage today." His valor at Badr was totally unmatched, but it also painted a massive target on his back.
Which brings us to Section 4, the stand at Uhud, a truly tragic climax. A year later, the Quraysh return, and they are incredibly thirsty for revenge. Hamza's actually one of the key voices urging the Muslims to march out and meet the enemy in the open field at Mount Uhud. Once the battle begins, he's right there again, fighting at the very center of the army. But here's the thing. The Quraysh have a specific, highly targeted assassination plot this time. Hind bin Utbah hires a skilled javelin thrower named Washi, whose one and only mission is to kill Hamza. And while Hamza is locked in intense combat, Washi just quietly stalks him from the shadows of the rocks. Taking his moment, Washi hurls his javelin. It pierces Hamza, dealing a fatal blow. And just like that, a literal giant of history falls into the desert sand. Much like a single white flower resting gracefully on a battlefield, the Lion of Allah found his rest, leaving behind an incredible legacy of bravery. The tragedy was only compounded when his fallen body was severely mutilated by those seeking vengeance. It was, quite honestly, a heartbreaking end to a life defined by such unwavering strength.
Finally, Section 5, the Master of Martyrs. Let's look at his enduring legacy. The historical accounts of his burial are just incredibly poignant. Upon finding his uncle, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wept with a level of grief he had never experienced before. And despite his noble lineage, Hamza was buried in a state of absolute humility. Shrouded in a single sheet that was actually too short for his tall frame, they had to use sweet-smelling idhir grass to cover his feet. As the martyrs of Uhud were laid to rest, the Prophet placed each one beside Hamza to perform the funeral prayer, praying over his beloved uncle a staggering 72 times that day. He left behind eternal titles for the Ummah. The first, of course, is Asadullah, the Lion of Allah. But this wasn't just about his physical ability to swing a sword. It completely symbolized the perfect blend of martial force and total, unwavering divine loyalty. He was a warrior whose immense strength was governed entirely by his faith.
And then the second title is perhaps even more profound: Sayyid al-Shuhada, the Master of Martyrs. Bestowed upon him directly by the Prophet, this title holds deep theological resonance across the entire Muslim world today. Hamza represents the absolute standard of sacrifice. He's the ultimate blueprint of courage and protection for the entire Ummah.
So we've walked through the life of a man who gave up his comfort and his neutrality to stand as a shield for the truth, paying the highest possible price. So my question to you is this: how does this hero of Islam, Hamza ibn Abdul-Muttalib, radiallahu anhu, and his spirit of ultimate sacrifice continue to protect and inspire you today? Take a moment to really reflect on that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning,